I opened a credit card to pay for my son's hospital bills. A few days later, I saw photos of my daughter-in-law on vacation in Hawaii. When I asked her where she got the money, she shrugged and told me sarcastically, "From your card? Mom, don't worry, I only spent about $50,000. I let out a laugh. My card only has a $10,000 limit. Are you sure you read the name correctly? I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I push open the old wooden door of the house, and the hinges creak as if in sync with the tired rhythm of my heart. I spent the entire day at the hospital with James, my son, with the smell of disinfectant clinging to every fiber of the thin sweater I was wearing. My legs feel heavy, as if each step is dragging an invisible boulder. The old purse, with its worn leather strap, still hangs from my shoulder, but I didn't even have time to set it down before Chloe had already swept into the living room, as light as a breeze, oblivious to the heaviness that filled the house. She, my daughter-in-law, was wearing a shiny Gucci silk dress, the kind I only dare to look at on billboards. Her face was meticulously made up, her lips a full, glossy red, her false eyelashes long and curled. Her heels clicked against the tile floor, each step exuding an arrogant confidence. She held her phone in her hand, her fingers flying across the screen, busy finding the best angle to post a check-in. I stood there, watching her toss her suitcase aside as if it were an obstacle, before gracefully sitting on the sofa, crossing her legs, and picking up a cup of coffee that had been cold since morning. A lopsided, self-satisfied smile played on her lips, as if the entire world belonged to her. I suppressed a sigh and tried to keep my voice soft, though exhaustion weighed on my chest. "Chloe, you're back already? Where have you been?" I asked in a hoarse tone, as if each word fought its way out of my dry throat. Chloe leaned back on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone screen, not bothering to look at me. "Hawaii," she answered, her voice lazy, as if talking about a walk in the park. "It was incredible, Eleanor. Much nicer than that stuffy hospital where you spend all your time." Her words cut through me like a knife. Hawaii. While James and I were fighting through the darkest days of our lives, she was in Hawaii, enjoying the sun and the blue sea. I stood frozen, feeling the ground crumble beneath my feet. My throat tightened. A wave of bitterness rose in me. But before I could say anything else, Chloe held out a gold credit card to me, gleaming under the living room light like an expensive jewel. "Thanks to your card," she said, her tone a mix of indifference and pride. "Don't worry, I only spent a little, barely $100,000. $100,000. The number thundered in my head. I froze, my hands gripping the strap of my purse tightly. And like an uncontrollable reflex, I let out a harsh, bitter laugh that echoed in the quiet room. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of disbelief, of the pain of betrayal. $100,000, I repeated, my voice trembling. "Chloe, that card only has a limit of $10,000. Did you even look at the name on the card?" Chloe flinched, and for a moment I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes, like a candle wavering in the wind. But she quickly regained her composure, swiftly putting the card away in her designer bag and taking a sip of coffee to hide her unease. The coffee was cold. I knew that for a fact, because I had made it myself that morning before rushing to the hospital. Still, she feigned nonchalance, as if there was nothing to worry about. I sat down silently in the chair across from her. My legs were shaking, not from fatigue, but from the storm of emotions raging inside me. I took out my phone. My trembling fingers opened the banking app. With every tap on the screen, I felt my heart beat faster, as if trying to warn me of a truth I wasn't ready for. "I'm going to show her the truth," I thought quietly, but deep down I was afraid that what I was about to discover would destroy what little trust I had left. The atmosphere in the room grew thick, heavy, as if the air had turned to lead. The only sound was the second hand of the wall clock ticking slowly, like a countdown before a bomb went off. Outside, from the quiet side street, came the faint sound of a car horn mixed with the wind seeping through the window. I was there, facing Chloe, the daughter-in-law I once loved like a daughter. But now I only saw an impossible abyss between us. Just a few days ago, my life was still calm, without luxuries, but full of love. James was always my pride, a noble, hard-working man, always smiling like the summer sun in Austin. But then, like an unexpected nightmare, everything changed in an instant. That day, I was in the kitchen, chopping onions for the chili he loved so much. The sting of the onions made my eyes water, but I could still clearly hear the laughter coming from the living room. James was telling Chloe about a difficult client at his firm, his voice full of life, mixed with her soft laugh. I smiled, thinking that even if life was hard, as long as they were happy, I would be too. But suddenly, the laughter stopped. A heavy thud echoed, as if something had fallen hard to the floor. I dropped the knife and ran to the living room. My heart stopped when I saw James lying on the hardwood floor, his hand on his chest, his face turning blue, gasping for breath. "James!" I cried desperately, rushing to his side. Chloe was just standing there, her eyes wide, phone in hand, as if she didn't understand what was happening. "Chloe, call an ambulance, quick!" I shouted, kneeling beside James, gripping his hand with my trembling ones. His hand was freezing. Those fingers that were always so warm now felt lifeless. I pressed my ear to his chest, searching for the faint beat of his heart, while I whispered over and over again, "Son, don't leave me. Please, don't leave me." Chloe finally snapped out of it, dialing frantically, her voice trembling as she spoke to the paramedic. In less than 10 minutes, the wail of the ambulance siren blared in front of our house. Between the two of us, we lifted James and got him inside. I held him tight, feeling that if I let go, I would lose him forever. In the vehicle, the flashing lights dazzled me. The siren pierced through my chest. I squeezed his hand, praying with all the faith I had left, begging God not to take my son. Beside me, Chloe huddled, but her eyes remained fixed on her phone. Through my sobs, I heard her mutter with irritation, "No, I can't go now. That plan will have to wait. Don't you understand? My husband is—" Her voice trailed off, but I no longer cared. My entire focus was on James, clinging to every shallow breath he managed to take. The ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the entrance of the main county hospital. Nurses quickly wheeled James into the emergency room, and the glass door slammed shut in front of me. I stood there, helpless, watching the gurney disappear down the hall. A young doctor, his hair matted with sweat, rushed out and shouted, "Acute myocardial infarction. We need to operate immediately." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. I stumbled and had to lean against the cold wall to keep from falling. Chloe collapsed onto the chairs in the hallway, tears streaming down her cheeks. But even as she cried, she didn't let go of her phone. She scrolled, typed nonstop, and occasionally got up to go to a corner and answer calls. I managed to hear her whisper, "Yes, I'll arrange it. No, I can't pass up this opportunity." I looked at her with a heavy heart. While her husband, my son, was fighting for his life, she was still focused on these opportunities, but I had no strength to question her. I just sat there, alone, facing an immense fear, as if the whole world was slowly slipping away from me. Many hours passed, each minute as long as a century. I remained in the waiting room chair, my hands clasped together, my nails digging into my skin. Every time the emergency room door opened, my heart stopped, hoping for good news. Finally, the doctor came out, his face serious, his mask hanging from his chin. He looked at me and said in a grave voice, "Ma'am, James's condition is very delicate. We need to operate now, but first, you must leave a deposit of $10,000 for the surgery and medications." I nodded immediately, without a second's hesitation. "Yes, I'll take care of it right now," I replied, though inside I had no idea how. My savings had run out long ago, but I couldn't let my son lie there without help. "Save my son, please," I whispered, my voice broken. The next morning, I rose with the first light, put on an old sweater, and went straight to the bank. The line was incredibly long, but I waited patiently, with a single thought in my mind: save James. The bank teller, with a nameplate that read, "Emily," looked at me with compassion. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to open a credit card with a $10,000 limit? The interest rate will be quite high," she said softly. I nodded without thinking. "I need it. Right now," I answered, feeling as if my son's life was in my hands. Emily guided me step by step, with such patience that I felt a small sense of relief amidst the storm. When she handed me the new card in a white envelope, I clutched it tightly, as if it were my last hope. "Thank you," I murmured, my eyes misty. Emily smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Everything will be all right, Eleanor. May God bless your son." I returned to the hospital with a bit more calm. At the billing counter, I handed the card to the employee, my heart racing as she swiped it through the reader. A beep sounded, and she nodded. "Transaction approved, Eleanor." I let out a sigh, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. At least now my son had a chance to live. I put the card in the deepest pocket of my purse, where I always keep the most important things. Entering the hospital room, I saw James dozing in the bed, with IV tubes hanging all over his body. His face was pale, his lips dry and chapped, but there was still that faint breath, a sign that my son was still fighting. I pulled a chair over and sat by the bed, gently squeezing his hand. "Mom's here, son," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. On the other side of the room, Chloe sat silently, but her eyes were glued to her phone screen, her fingers swiping endlessly. I looked at her, my heart tight. I wanted to ask what she was doing. I wanted to ask why she wasn't there, holding her husband's hand as I was, but I said nothing. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, words full of bitterness would come out, and I didn't want to hurt James anymore. In the hallway, the hospital's PA system crackled to life, announcing another emergency. The sound of nurses' hurried footsteps, the voices of family members murmuring comfort, all mixed into a chaos that seemed to mirror the ruin of my soul. I stayed there, by my son's bedside, with a credit card in my purse and an uncertain future before me. At dawn, when the first rays of sun filtered through the branches of the oak trees in the backyard, I was already awake, quietly packing a basket for James. My hands quickly folded the clean t-shirts he liked, also choosing some soft towels, hoping a little familiar warmth would comfort him during his hospital stay. In the kitchen, I turned on the stove and started making a small pot of chicken noodle soup, the same one James always asked for when he was sick as a child. The aroma spread through the house, bringing back memories of times when the family would gather around a simple table, and James's laughter filled every corner. But now, those memories seemed distant, shrouded by the shadows of the past few days. With the basket in hand, I went out to the living room, my heart heavy but clinging to a spark of hope that James would be better today. But as I stepped into the room, I stopped dead in my tracks. Chloe was there, kneeling beside a large, open suitcase on the floor. Designer clothes, shiny heels, expensive cosmetics were scattered everywhere, as if she were emptying an entire boutique. She was wearing a light silk blouse, her hair pulled up high, but her movements were hurried, almost desperate. The sound of the suitcase zipper closing echoed coldly in the morning quiet. "Chloe, what are you doing?" I asked, a mix of surprise and concern in my voice. "Where are you going that you're packing in such a hurry?" She looked up. Her eyes flickered over me before she forced a smile. "The company has an urgent matter, Eleanor," she replied, trying to sound calm, though I detected a slight tremor in her voice. "I have to travel immediately. Don't worry, I'll make sure everything is taken care of." Her words made me hesitate. A business trip? Right now, when James is in the hospital? When the whole family is in anguish? I wanted to keep questioning, to press her on what she was hiding, but just then my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I pulled it out immediately. It was the hospital. A nurse's urgent voice came through the line. "Eleanor, can you bring Mr. James's personal belongings as soon as possible? We need to prepare him for this morning's checkup." I nodded, though she couldn't see me, and replied, "I'm on my way." I looked at Chloe, intending to say something more, but she had already turned away, continuing to stuff things into her suitcase as if my presence didn't matter. I had no choice but to set aside all my doubts, take the basket, and rush out of the house. Inside, a sense of unease began to creep in, as if something wasn't right, but I didn't have time to think about it. James was waiting for me. When I arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was as suffocating as ever. The announcements over the loudspeaker, the squeak of gurneys rolling down the hall, and the anxious murmurs of patients' families all blended into one noise. I approached the counter, ready to hand the basket to the nurse, when a young employee with glasses looked at me with apologetic eyes. "Eleanor, there's an additional cost for James's surgery," she said in a soft but uncomfortable voice. Could you pay for it now? We need to complete the paperwork before starting the next procedure. I nodded, trying to remain calm, though my heart was already pounding. Yes, I'll pay right away. I opened my purse, ready to take out the credit card I had carefully stored in the secret compartment. But when I reached inside, I only felt an empty space. My heart skipped a beat. I rummaged through the purse, emptying everything onto the counter. Keys, old receipts, a few coins, but the card was gone. This can't be, I muttered, confused. I was sure I had put it away after the last payment, or did I leave it at home? I forced myself to calm down, thinking that perhaps I had left it on the kitchen table in my morning rush. I'll do an online transfer, I told the employee, my voice trembling. I took out my phone. My fingers swiped across the screen to open the banking app. But just then, a social media notification popped up, glowing on the screen. Chloe is now live. I froze. A moment of curiosity, or perhaps a bitter premonition, made me tap the notification. The image that appeared left me cold. Chloe, dressed in a striking red silk dress, was laughing joyfully at a luxurious table. In her hand, a cocktail glass sparkled in the sunlight, streaming through the window. In the background, a deep blue beach stretched out, the sound of waves mixing with lively Hawaiian music. She was hugging a man and an older woman, whom she called Dad and Mom, with a sweet voice and affectionate gestures as if they were a real family. Then, a young man with slicked-back hair appeared, wrapped his arm around Chloe's waist, and gave her a passionate kiss on the cheek. The crowd around them cheered, the applause erupting like a strange melody, distant from the world of pain I was in. My heart pounded, my hands trembled so much I almost dropped the phone. My breathing became heavy, as if the air in the hospital hallway had suddenly turned thick. Chloe, where was she? Hawaii, she had said. But who were these people she was calling Mom and Dad? And that young man? I felt a pang in my chest, not from illness but from the betrayal revealing itself so clearly before my eyes. Eleanor, can you make the payment now? The nurse's voice beside me brought me back to reality. She was looking at me with concern. Your son's surgery is about to begin. I quickly exited the social media app, my stiff fingers trying to enter the password into the banking app. But in my mind, 1,000 questions swirled like a vortex. What was Chloe doing? Why was she there while James was fighting for his life? And the credit card? If it wasn't in my purse, then where was it? But I had to put all that aside. My son was in surgery, and I couldn't afford to be distracted. Okay, I'll transfer it right away, I said in a hoarse voice, trying to focus on the phone screen. Now, in the living room, the silence was so thick it was suffocating. My gaze remained fixed on the shiny gold credit card Chloe had left on the table. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice clear, icy, as if rage and disappointment had frozen every other emotion. My card's limit is only $10,000, and I already used it to pay the hospital. You spent $100,000. Whose card did you use? Chloe let out a sarcastic, mocking laugh, as if I had said something absurd. Do you think I'm that stupid, Eleanor? She said sharply, her eyes flashing with arrogance. You left the card on the table yourself. I just picked it up. Here it is. She pulled a gleaming gold card from her purse, holding it up in front of me like a trophy. The ceiling light shone on it, identical to the one I had used to pay for James's surgery. But deep inside me, a dark premonition made my heart beat faster. I reached out to take the card. My trembling fingers grazed the smooth surface. I examined it carefully. I turned it over, squinting to read the tiny printed letters. The color, the logo, everything looked the same as mine. But upon closer inspection, I noticed the difference. The bank printed on the card was not mine. A chill ran down my spine. I frowned. My voice grew grave. This isn't my card. Look closely. The bank is different. Mine is still here. I opened my purse. My fingers went straight to the zippered secret compartment where I always keep the most important things. There it was, untouched. My credit card, safe in the worn lining. I held it up in front of Chloe, my eyes never leaving hers. This is mine, I said, my voice calm but sharp as a razor. So how do you explain this? Chloe's face contorted, pale as a sheet. Her eyes widened, showing a flash of panic. With trembling hands, she took the strange card I handed back to her. She turned it over and over, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "No, it can't be," she stammered, her voice breaking. "Then whose card did I use?" Her question sounded like a desperate whisper, not directed at me, but at herself. Suddenly, Chloe became frantic. She emptied her entire purse onto the floor. Lipsticks rolled away. An eyeshadow palette shattered. Shopping receipts flew everywhere. I stood there, watching her rummage through everything like a madwoman. But the truth was undeniable. My card was still in my hands. And that other gold card was proof of a secret I didn't yet fully understand. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from a deeper pain. The pain of betrayal, of trust shattered into pieces. Just then, Chloe's phone rang with a shrill tone, cutting through the tension. She jumped, quickly picked up the phone, and her face grew paler and paler as she listened to the voice on the other end. "Yes, sir, of course, I'll be right there," she murmured in a hushed, almost pleading voice. She hung up without a single explanation, slung her purse over her shoulder, and ran out of the house as if she were fleeing. The wooden door slammed shut behind her, the sharp sound piercing my heart like a stab wound. The strange, gleaming gold card was left alone on the table, shining under the light like a silent challenge. About 2 hours later, while I was folding James's clean clothes, the front door burst open. I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat as I saw Chloe stumbling in. Her face was distraught, her mascara streaked in long black lines down her cheeks, her eyes swollen as if she had cried herself empty. The once dazzling Gucci silk dress was now wrinkled, her hair a mess, and all the arrogance from the morning was gone. As soon as she saw me, she collapsed into the nearest chair, covered her face, and broke into choked sobs that filled the silent room. I left the pile of clothes on the table and approached slowly, my voice calm, but with a knot in my chest. "What happened at work, Chloe?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling, though doubt and pain weighed on my soul. She looked up, her eyes red, and spoke in broken phrases, as if each word was a struggle. "Eleanor, I didn't mean to. I swear I thought it was your card." Her voice trembled, mixed with sobs. I crossed my arms and waited in silence, not interrupting, but not offering comfort just yet. I needed to hear the truth, even if it destroyed me. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, but tears continued to stream down her face. She explained, her voice shaky, that on the day I left for the hospital, she had gone through my purse intending to steal my credit card to go on her trip. I wanted to escape this suffocating atmosphere," she said, looking at the floor as if ashamed of herself. But when she arrived at her office to pick up some papers, she saw a shiny gold card on the floor, identical to mine. She thought it was the one she had taken and dropped without realizing, so she picked it up and put it in her wallet. "I swear, Eleanor, I didn't know it was the company card," she said, almost pleading. "I thought it was yours, that's why. That's why I used it without thinking. 5-star hotels, parties, jewelry. I thought I was spending your money and I didn't stop." She lowered her head, clenching her hands so tightly her nails dug into her skin. "But today, my boss called me. They found out everything. They said I spent $100,000 on the company card. They called the police, Eleanor. They said I'm going to be prosecuted, that I might even go to jail." I sat across from her, my heart as heavy as lead. Her confession didn't surprise me, but each word was like a blade cutting me from the inside. I had loved her like a daughter. I had believed she would be the woman to make James happy. But now, seeing her there, trembling and crying, all I saw was a stranger. Someone who had not only betrayed her husband but also my deepest trust. Chloe crawled over to me. She grabbed my hand tightly. Tears streamed down her face. "Eleanor, save me," she cried, her voice broken. "Only you can save me. I don't want to go to jail, Eleanor. I'm begging you, help me." Her hands squeezed mine, cold and trembling, as if I were her last lifeline. I looked into her eyes. Those shimmering tears couldn't hide the selfishness behind them. I sighed and gently pulled my hands away. "I don't have $100,000, Chloe," I said in a calm but firm voice. "And even if I did, this is the price you have to pay for your actions. You were the one who chose this path, not me. Hearing this, Chloe's expression changed instantly. The tears still fell, but a flicker of resentment appeared in her eyes. She shot up, her voice harsh, almost screaming. "You've never considered me part of this family. If you would just co-sign for me, they would let me go. You want to abandon me? Fine, don't regret it later." She slapped my hand away, and her words, sharp as blades, cut into my already fractured heart. Without waiting for my reply, Chloe ran upstairs and slammed a door. The sharp click of the lock was like the final end to a painful chapter. I stood there, in silence, listening to her sobs drift down from the room, mixed with the constant call of the ice cream truck from Mrs. Peterson's route down the street. That everyday sound, once a part of this home's peace, now only filled me with sadness. It contrasted sharply with the hurricane that had just erupted, leaving me alone among the broken pieces of my family. The next morning, I got up early and packed a basket of food for James. A pot of hot chicken soup, some biscuits wrapped in foil, and a pitcher of the orange juice my son always liked. I wanted to bring him a little warmth from home, hoping those familiar flavors would make him feel closer to his family, even just a little, amidst those cold days in the hospital. Every time I wrapped a biscuit, I remembered those nights when James would sit at the kitchen table. He'd eat while telling me about his day at work, his eyes shining like a child's. But now those memories just weighed heavier on my heart. I took the basket and went out to the yard, ready to go to the hospital. As soon as I opened the iron gate, with its usual creak, I saw Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who sold popsicles from her cart, passing by. She stopped, looked at me with her kind eyes, but her gaze held a hint of hesitation, as if she didn't know whether she should speak. "Eleanor," she said hesitantly, "there's something that's been bothering me, and I don't know if I should tell you." I stood still, feeling the basket grow heavier in my hands. "What is it, Mrs. Peterson?" I asked softly, although a bad feeling was already starting to grow inside me. I knew she wasn't one to gossip, so if she was speaking up, it had to be important. She lowered her voice, whispering as if afraid someone might hear. "Last week, I went to the mall to buy a few things. By chance, I saw your daughter-in-law, Chloe. She was with a young man, very elegant, with slicked-back hair and a watch that sparkled. Chloe was holding his arm, laughing and calling him honey, as if they were a real couple." She paused, looking at me with compassionate eyes. There was also a couple our age with them. They went into a jewelry store, and the woman was pointing at diamond necklaces and rings, but what I saw was that it was always Chloe who took out the card to pay. Every word from Mrs. Peterson landed like a hammer blow to my chest. I stood still, feeling the air around me suddenly turn thick, impossible to breathe. The image of Chloe in the live video from Hawaii flashed clearly in my mind. Her radiant smile, the way she hung on the arm of an older couple and called them Mom and Dad, and the young man who hugged her by the waist and gave her a kiss on the cheek amidst the cheers of the crowd. I had tried to ignore it, to convince myself that maybe I had misinterpreted it. But now Mrs. Peterson's words were like a sharp knife, shattering any illusion I had left. "Mrs. Peterson, are you sure?" I asked with a trembling voice, though deep down I already knew the answer. I took out my phone. My fingers shook as I reopened the video Chloe had posted. Her image on the beach in Hawaii appeared, with that arrogant smile and eyes shining under the sundae. I showed the phone to Mrs. Peterson. My heart pounded in my chest. These are the ones you saw, right?" Mrs. Peterson squinted to get a better look, and then nodded firmly. "Yes, that's them. The couple I saw at the mall is the same one in this video." She shook her head, her voice full of sympathy. "I don't want to cause you pain, Eleanor, but I thought you should know. Your daughter-in-law is not only running around, but she's also spending money like it's nothing, and I doubt it's hers." I gripped the phone tightly, feeling my hand tremble uncontrollably. The image of the young man hugging Chloe and that passionate kiss on her cheek appeared vividly, like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I wanted to scream, to run and confront Chloe immediately, but I just stood there, motionless, in the middle of the yard. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree, carrying the morning chill. In my mind, the pieces were beginning to fit together, painting a painful picture. My daughter-in-law, whom I had considered a daughter, had not only abandoned James when my son was fighting for his life, but was also openly cheating on him, even supporting her lover's family. "Mrs. Peterson, thank you for telling me," I whispered in a hoarse voice. I need time to think." She placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze full of understanding for my pain. "You are very strong, Eleanor," she said in a warm voice. "James needs you. Don't let this break you." Then she shook her head sadly and continued on her way with her cart, her little bell jingling in the morning breeze, a simple sound that felt so distant to my shattered heart. I closed the gate. The creak sounded like a reminder of reality. I gripped the handle of the bag tightly, feeling it was the only thing keeping me upright. I walked quickly towards the street, my soul heavy but not allowing myself to stop. James was waiting for me at the hospital, and now more than ever, I knew I had to be strong. Not just for me, but for my son, who had suffered too much without even knowing it. That afternoon, the golden sunlight filtered through the hospital window, illuminating the cold hallway where I was sitting. James had just fallen asleep. My son's face was still pale, but his breathing was more stable, a small sign that he was fighting his way back. I moved my chair into the hallway, looking for a quiet corner to rest, but my heart found no peace. The hospital noises, the PA system announcements, the wheels of gurneys on the floor, the whispers of families consoling each other, only stirred the whirlwind inside me more. Every sound was a reminder that I was standing on the thin line between hope and despair. I picked up my phone. I ran my fingers across the screen, not to kill time, but because a decision was burning inside me. I had to uncover the truth. What Mrs. Peterson told me, along with Chloe's video and that strange credit card, no longer allowed me to look the other way. I needed to know what Chloe was hiding and why she had betrayed James, betrayed this entire family. I opened Chloe's social media profile again, scrolling through the lavish photos she had posted from Hawaii. Those images, with the bright sun, sparkling cocktails, and her haughty smile, now only broke my heart. I scrolled down to where her tagged friends appeared, and an unfamiliar name jumped out at me: Julian Vance. The same young man who was hugging Chloe in the video, the one she called Honey with that sweet, fake voice. I went to his profile, with doubt in my chest but also with the need to find answers. Julian Vance's profile looked like another world, ostentatious and distant. Photos showing off enormous mansions, luxury cars, expensive watches glittering on his wrist. He posed in front of extravagant settings with a smug smile, just like Chloe's. I scrolled through image after image, looking for any detail that could clarify everything, and then, in a panoramic photo of a house, I squinted and made out a small sign on the iron gate. The letters were barely legible, but clear enough to understand. Sunshine Road. The hills at Barton Creek. I felt a jolt in my chest. That was a clue, a call forcing me to go after the truth, no matter how painful. I looked at the comments below the photo, and the fawning phrases made my skin crawl. "The most powerful family in the hills," someone wrote. "A true heir," commented another, accompanied by a fire emoji. And among them all, there were Chloe's red hearts, indelible marks of her complicity. I gripped the phone tightly, as if the blood in my veins was beginning to boil. Chloe wasn't just cheating, she had also gotten involved in a world I didn't know, a world full of lies and appearances. I texted Rose, the young nurse I had met at the hospital, to ask her to watch James for a moment. "Eleanor, where are you going? James still needs you here," she replied with concern. I answered briefly, "I'll be back soon. Please, take care of my son." Then I quickly jotted down the address from the photo on a piece of paper, my hand shaking but my will firm. I couldn't just stand by. I couldn't let the doubts continue to consume me. I had to face the truth, even if it was cruel. I left the hospital and took a taxi waiting at the entrance. The driver, an elderly man with white hair, looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked in a gravelly voice. I handed him the paper and said, "Sunshine Road, the hills at Barton Creek." He nodded without another word and turned on an old country song. The sad melody filled the car. The lyrics pierced my heart. Even after all this time, the taste of love remains. I closed my eyes, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. That song, once a favorite of my husband and me, now only tore my soul apart more. The taxi stopped in front of an imposing mansion in the hills, identical to the one I had seen on Julian Vance's profile. Immaculate white walls, a black gate with iron ornaments, and a green garden that seemed otherworldly, distant and ostentatious, compared to my simple life. I got out of the car, my heart pounding. Each beat pushed me to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. The evening wind brought the chill of sunset and made me shiver in my thin sweater. I took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. Its long chime broke the silence, as if announcing that I had arrived in search of answers. The gate slowly opened, and a middle-aged man appeared, dressed in a gray suit, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp but cordial gaze. "Who are you?" he asked in a deep voice, observing me with some curiosity. I gripped my phone tightly and answered calmly, though I was trembling inside. "Excuse me, I'm Eleanor. I'm looking for the people in this video." I showed him the phone with the video of Chloe in Hawaii, radiant on the beach, hugging an older couple and calling them Mom and Dad. He frowned, watched the video attentively, and then shook his head in surprise. "How strange," he murmured, lowering his voice. "Just a moment ago, a young woman came here crying, asking the same thing you are. Isn't this the same person?" He pointed to Chloe on the screen, whose haughty smile now stabbed me like a knife in the heart. I nodded, my throat dry. "Yes, that's her. My daughter-in-law, Chloe." My voice broke, but I tried to stay firm. "Please, I need to know who the people in that video are." He sighed and motioned for me to follow. "I'm Richard Wallace, the real owner of this house," he explained as he led me through the manicured garden to a spacious living room, adorned with paintings and elegant furniture. He invited me to sit, but I remained standing, phone in hand, my soul filled with anguish. Richard looked at me with some compassion. "The people in that video are not my family," he stated confidently. "They are just the caretakers I hired to look after the house when I travel for work." I stood frozen, feeling the floor move beneath my feet. "Caretakers?" I repeated in a trembling voice, unable to process it. Richard nodded and continued in a somber tone. "They've worked here for over a year. I left on a trip a month ago and put them in charge of everything. I never imagined they would dare to pose as the owners to deceive people." My mind went blank. The pieces in my head were starting to fit together, but each one was like a deeper cut in my heart. Julian, the older couple Chloe called parents, it had all been a sham. They weren't a rich family, not the influential people from the hills, as the comments on social media boasted. They were scammers who took advantage of Chloe's naivety, or rather her ambition, to get money from her. My throat went dry. I had to lean on the back of the chair to keep from falling. "So, where are they now?" I asked in a weak voice, as if clinging to one last hope of being able to confront them, to demand justice for James. Richard shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. "They quit suddenly yesterday, packed their things, and disappeared without a trace. I also found out the truth this morning, when your daughter-in-law came here making a scene. She was crying, saying they deceived her, took her money, and ran away." I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the whole world collapse beneath my feet. The wind blew in from the garden by the window, carrying dry leaves that fell onto the path. The rustling of the leaves seemed to mix with the sound of my heart breaking. Everything was clear. Julian and the supposed rich family were nothing but phonies. They had manipulated Chloe's foolishness and greed, getting her to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with the company's credit card. And now they had fled, leaving Chloe alone to face the consequences. "Chloe came here?" I asked. My voice choked. Richard nodded and told me that Chloe had shown up at the gate that morning, her hair a mess, crying and screaming that she wanted to see Julian's family. She believed they were still here. She thought they would help her out of her problems with the company. But upon discovering the truth, she collapsed and left in tears and despair. I thanked Richard with a barely audible thread of a voice. I turned and left the mansion. Each step felt as heavy as if I were dragging a huge rock. The sunset painted the deserted road red, stretching my lonely shadow on the sidewalk. I knew that by now, Chloe had also discovered the true face of those she had trusted so much, but it was too late. She had dug her own grave. and I, no matter how much pain I felt, could not save her from her own mistakes. The next morning, sunbeams filtered through the hospital curtains, illuminating James's pale face as he slept soundly in the bed. I was by his side, holding his hand tightly, still trembling after so many days of anguish. When Dr. Herrera came out of the operating room, he took off his mask and smiled at me. I felt as if a world of weight had suddenly been lifted off me. "The surgery was very successful, Eleanor," he said in a calm voice. "He will recover soon. He just needs to rest and be kept under observation." I burst into tears, tears streaming down my cheeks, not of pain, but of overwhelming relief. I hugged Rose, the nurse who was next to me, whispering my thanks as if she too were part of the miracle that had kept James with me. When James woke up, his eyes opened wide, looking at me with a bit of confusion. "Mom," he whispered, his voice weak but full of affection. I squeezed his hand and smiled, though inside I still carried the weight of the secrets I held. "I'm here, son," I said, trying to keep my voice soft. "You're going to be okay." The doctor allowed James to leave the hospital at noon, on the condition that he get absolute rest at home. I packed everything, from clean clothes to a pitcher of orange juice, telling myself silently that as long as James recovered, I could overcome any difficulty. On the way home, sitting in our usual taxi, I looked at James, who was already sitting up straighter, though his face was still pale. He gazed out the window, his look distant, as if trying to reclaim life after brushing against death. I knew the time had come to tell him the truth, however painful it might be. I took a deep breath, gathered all my courage, and began to speak. "James, I need to tell you something," I said, my voice trembling, "about Chloe." He turned to me, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "About her? What's wrong, Mom?" His voice was weak but full of curiosity. I told him everything, from the strange credit card, the video in Hawaii, to Chloe's confession and what I discovered at Richard's mansion. I tried to stay calm, but every word that came out was like a knife I was stabbing myself with. I told him how Chloe had been unfaithful, had spent the company's money, and had fallen into the trap of scammers posing as a rich family. At first, James shook his head, his eyes full of doubt. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice cracking. "Chloe wouldn't do that to me." I saw his gaze waver, as if he were trying to hold on to the last spark of faith in the woman he loved. Silently, I took out my phone and played the fateful video. Chloe, radiant on the screen, embraced by a strange couple, and a young man kissing her cheek. I handed him the phone and felt my heart break when I saw James's face turn even paler than it was after the surgery. He closed his eyes, and a single tear rolled down his cheek, silent, like a farewell to the happy days that would never return. "Forgive me, Mom," James whispered, his voice choked. "I didn't see. I didn't know." I squeezed his hand, wanting to give him some strength. "It's not your fault," I said, my voice trembling. "I just want you to know the truth, so you can move on." But inside, the pain was tearing me apart. I had wanted to protect James from all suffering, and now I was the one delivering this blow. The taxi stopped in front of the house's gate, which was already open and creaking in the afternoon wind. I helped James get out, but as soon as we stepped into the yard, I saw Chloe sitting on the steps. Her hair was messy, her silk dress wrinkled, and her eyes were sunken as if she hadn't slept all night. She looked up, saw James, and immediately ran to him, falling to her knees in front of my son, grabbing his hands in desperation. "Honey, please save me," she sobbed, her voice broken by hiccups. "The company fired me. They're demanding I pay back the full $100,000. I'm about to face a lawsuit. I have nowhere to go." I took a step back, watching silently, my heart cold. James looked at Chloe, and in his eyes there was no longer love, only an icy resolve I had never seen in him. "Chloe," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "I'm sending the divorce papers tomorrow. I can't live with someone who betrayed and deceived both her mother-in-law and her husband." Chloe broke down in tears, hugging James's legs, pleading, "No, please, don't do it. I know I was wrong. I swear I'll change." But James just silently removed her hands, finger by finger, with the same coldness with which he was closing the door on the love he once had for her. He walked alone towards the house, his steps slow but firm, leaving Chloe on her knees, crying in the middle of the yard. I closed the heavy iron gate, and the creak of the hinges sounded as if it were sealing a dark chapter in our family's life. In the weeks after James announced the divorce, the small house where we lived was filled with a strange calm, as if the storm had passed. I spent most of my time by his side, taking care of him, cooking his favorite meals, and trying to bring some peace back to his wounded soul. On the morning of the trial, I woke up early, as dawn was just breaking. I prepared a white shirt for James, carefully smoothing every crease, as if by doing so I could preserve a bit of dignity for what was to come. James was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee in silence, his gaze lost, submerged in memories I couldn't reach. "Mom, I'm fine," he said in a hoarse voice, but the faint smile on his lips couldn't hide the pain. I just nodded, took his hand, and together we left the house, knowing that day would change everything. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was heavy and suffocating. The long hallways lit by cold fluorescent lights made my skin crawl. James and I sat in the front row, in silence, waiting for the hearing to begin. When the door opened and a bailiff escorted Chloe in, I felt a knot in my chest. She was no longer the arrogant woman in Gucci dresses with a haughty smile. Her face was gaunt, her hair tangled, her dark circles deep as if she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes met ours for an instant, but she immediately looked down, unable to hold our gaze. The prosecutor stood up, his voice clear and firm, presenting the evidence against Chloe one by one. He showed the corporate card statements, the receipts for luxury purchases in Hawaii, from five-star hotels to expensive jewelry. He projected the video I had already seen countless times. Chloe smiling on the beach, embraced by the pair of scammers and the young man named Julian. Every image, every word that appeared on the courtroom's large screen was like a knife, not just for Chloe, but for James's heart and mine as well. Chloe's lawyer tried to defend her, his voice weak, almost desperate. My client was the victim of a romantic deception, he argued. She didn't know the card belonged to the company and was manipulated by these con artists. But those words faded into nothing. The prosecutor immediately refuted them, pointing out that Chloe took the card on purpose, used it without any restraint, and that her actions had not only broken the law, but also caused serious damage to the company. When the judge asked James if he wanted to say anything, my son stood up, his tall frame trembling slightly. He looked directly at Chloe, with eyes that held no trace of affection, only an icy firmness. "I have nothing more to say," he said, his voice calm but sharp as a razor. "I lost a wife, but at least I'm left with my dignity and my mother's." His words echoed in the courtroom, brief but heavy, silencing the entire room. I saw Chloe lower her head, clenching her hands tightly, as if wanting to escape James's gaze. The final verdict was delivered. The judge found Chloe guilty of embezzlement, sentenced her to 3 years in prison, and ordered her to repay the $100,000. At that moment, Chloe collapsed in her chair, screaming in desperation. Her sobs bounced off the flashes of reporters' cameras. "No, please, I don't want to go to prison," she cried, but no one in the room showed any sympathy. I looked at her and no longer felt anger, only a deep sadness. She had destroyed her own life and now had to pay the price. I took James's hand and led him outside. The noise of the courtroom, Chloe's screams, the murmurs of the audience, faded behind us. We walked out the courthouse doors, and the radiant midday sun bathed us in a warm, clear light. I took a deep breath, my chest feeling light, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. James looked at me and managed a faint smile. "Mom, we did the right thing, didn't we?" he asked in a subdued voice. "Yes, son," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We chose the truth, even though it hurt." I knew James was still hurting, but I also saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a new strength to move forward. Back in our modest home, I went into the kitchen, turned on the stove, and started making a hot chicken soup. The smell of sautéed onions, chicken, and vegetables spread, bringing back memories of the quiet days before the storm. James sat at the table, watching me in silence, with a softer look, as if he had reclaimed a part of himself. I placed the bowl of soup in front of him and smiled. "Eat, son," I said. "I made it just how you like it." The two of us ate together, in a strange but comforting peace. The sound of spoons against bowls, the wind rustling the leaves of the oak tree in the yard. Everything seemed to blend into a gentle melody that healed our wounds. I looked at James, then out at the yard, where the sun filtered through the branches, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. In that moment, I thought, sometimes the one who destroys a family is the same person we once loved, but the truth, however cruel, always ends up giving us back our freedom. I put my hand on James's shoulder, feeling the warmth of my son. Although the road ahead would still be difficult, I knew we would get through it because we had each other. And in that small house, amid simple meals and old memories, I found a spark of light, the light of hope, of healing, and of a new beginning. From everything I've lived through, I want to leave a message for everyone. In life, the most painful wounds don't always come from strangers, but from those we trust and love the most. But the truth, however harsh, is the only remedy that frees us from the darkness of lies. Only by facing it can we regain our peace and freedom of soul. Therefore, never blindly trust appearances or sweet words. Learn to protect your boundaries and your dignity, because justice and truth, in the end, always bring back the light to move forward. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I really wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. In the meantime, on the end screen, I'm leaving you 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.